at this point, if you're listening to this podcast, we all know that softwares are out there. They're beneficial to the company, but a software is only as good as how much we and our teams are actually using it. So Anna and I talk all through how to actually provide incentives to the team, how to build friendly competition to get them to actually, use the software itself to make sure that if we're going to jump all in and get a software, whether it's JobTread or some other software, people are actually going to use it time and time again. Today, I have Anna Hunter from JobTread. She is the Director of Learning and Development over there at JobTread. So, Anna, what I'd love for you to do is first just Director of Learning and Development. That's like I don't think many people listening to this have a Director of Learning and Development in their own company. So can you talk through what exactly that means and what you do at JobTread?
Ooh, good question. Yeah, this is kind of a unique department, you could call it, for many companies, especially those companies that are not corporate or who are not in the education sector. But typically what it means is that I get the opportunity to not only teach our JobTread users how to use the system, but also I get to go more broad than that and focus on their growth and their business development for their organizations. And so it's kind of a unique positioning here where I get to think broader than simply the processes of using a software and more into how to coach people in using software to enhance their businesses. So it's a really great position to be in because I not only get to teach on more of the micro level, but I get to actually help strategize on the macro level with all of our users.
So would that be like just understanding how people are growing their businesses and then like how JobTread maybe can kind of connect the dots to then maybe automate some of those features? Or is it more of like, hey, JobTread has this new product that just came out, and then now this is how you, client, have to align with it? I guess how does it all work?
Yeah, all of the above, Logan. I wish that it was so straightforward, but sometimes it's nice not to have that. So we can kind of scope creep a little bit and really kind of meet our users where they need us. And so what I see it as, though, boiling it down is, yes, we get to teach you on how to use JobTread. We get to share all of our new features with you, but even more so, how can we get the best practices into your hands and how can we connect you with other JobTread users that are similar to you so that you can learn from others as well? So not just seeing us as the experts, but also how can we position you around a series of experts that can help you enhance your business?
Got it. And I know, let's jump into your background because you didn't just like come to JobTread and go, hey, this software thing's pretty cool. Like you have several PhDs. You published a book last year. Can you kind of shed some light and maybe brag about yourself a little bit about how you came to be and what your background is with all this?
Yeah. Well, Logan, I'm a middle child and I'm the only redhead in the family. So I don't mind bragging and I like attention. So this works for me pretty well. So I grew up on construction sites. My dad is a contractor. He's been a contractor my whole life. And with 7 kids in the family, we had to be on the construction sites. We didn't have the option of daycare or nannies, to help us. And so we grew up with dirt under our nails and we kept it throughout the years. And so honestly, those of you from the Midwest, Menards was my playground. And we loved being, in the stores, meeting other contractors. And so it was really kind of a cool foundation to my upbringing. And then I ended up going into college and focusing on the psychology side of humans, where I ended up getting my bachelor's in more of health sciences, but then on to my master's, I focused on counseling. And that's where I really started understanding the human approach to everything in this world and how we need to keep that front and center, understand where people are coming from before we actually make decisions, right? And then after I worked in higher education or at colleges teaching leadership and such, I ended up going back to school, like you said, and got a doctorate in organizational development. But it really focused on change management because, yes, we can develop our organizations and we can grow our businesses. But if we're not keeping the change process in mind as far as how people navigate change, then it's going to end up stunting us in our growth in the long run. So that was really kind of something that I found myself leaning into naturally. And then I looked back and I'm like, gosh, every job that I've had, I ended up becoming the person that brought on the software and that introduced the software and implemented the software for our department, our organization. And so then when I saw that Eric Fortenberry, the founder and CEO of JobTread, when I saw that he was starting this company, I thought, construction, we have software, we have the opportunity to kind of help users adopt software. And I couldn't help but see myself working here so that I could position myself in a role where I can use all of those skills and all of my background in one place. So the focus now that I have is really leaning into software implementation, but by keeping your people first. It's front and center. And software is only as good as the people behind it. And so that's what the book is about. It's specifically on the human approach to software implementation. So I think that that's very relevant in today's age as we are all looking for software to solve our problems. The only way that we can really solve our problems is through the people that are using it.
So one of the things that we did here at CGN maybe 3 years ago was, and tell me if this story sounds familiar, but basically what we did was we were like, look, we're going to get way more system driven as a company. And what we're going to do is we're going to go out, we're going to find a project management software. And we went out. It was just our ops manager went out, found it, came back, said, this is the one that we're using, go. And basically what happened was we were trying to, everybody, first off, it was more of like a, hey, by the way, we're all in this software now, so get used to it. There was no like meetings about it or discussions around it. It was just like yesterday we had no software and today we have a software that we signed up for. Everybody was pretty much told to like, hey, there's tons of tutorials online. You figure it out. We'll have some trainings, but not really. And then as we're doing that, we're also trying to figure out what systems do we have that are good? What systems need to change? So we're basically trying to implement a new software with minimal training as we're trying to update our actual processes. And I would say at the 6-month mark, nobody had used that software for, like at that point, like nobody was doing it anymore. And then of course we did not renew after the first year because basically it was too much all at once. And it was horrible to the point where like, if you mention the word ClickUp in this office, there's a few people that like still get very frustrated just hearing it. So does that, like, as I talk through that, is that something that a lot of like construction companies are dealing with, or is this primarily just like CGN as a marketing agency struggle with it?
You're not alone. This is a narrative that I have heard over and over again, whether it's someone in the construction industry or out. Honestly, we all have this like excitement that comes with finding a solution that can solve our problems. But what we're not doing is we're not defining the problem really well right away and getting our team to understand the problem before we try to solve it. And so I lean on what I call the 3 C's, and I've actually added a 4C to that recently. And it's really the idea of clarity. We have to identify the problem, be very clear about what's not working in our organization. And this is not something that you just do as a business owner, define the problem. No, your whole team has to define the problem together. And then you need to develop consensus around that. So that's the second C is, okay, is everybody in agreement that this is a problem at the company and it is not going to get better unless we do something? And then the third C is commitment. Get a commitment from your whole team about, hey, what do we need to do in order to fix this? Do we have a commitment to fixing this in the first place? And then what is our route to get there? And then you can start searching for the solution, like a software system. And then after that point, develop curiosity with your team. Get them curious, get them looking for solutions. Or if you found something, start to just bring it into some conversations. Hey, we saw this software called JobTread at this conference. I'm really curious to hear what you all think about it. Or, hey, there was somebody that I talked to that used this system. Could you take a look at that? And you don't have to solve the problems for them, but if you develop the curiosity for your team there, then they'll start to search. They will start to look into it. And now you have their wheels turning and now they're engaged. So really kind of getting them in the conversation from the start and then into actually looking for the software. And that will automatically kind of help them be positioned in order for that change to take place bringing in a software program.
So what I want to do is I want to talk through the first C of clarity.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this, I want you to think through before you jumped into whatever software, like whatever like your problem was, like how well defined maybe you had it coming into it. But in your case, Anna, when we're talking about establishing clarity of what the actual problems are, how much of this should be, we know we have these 5 problems, and until we can sit down and identify, we're not even going to touch a software, versus, hey, we think we have this one problem. Once we implement this software, the other users are actually going to say, that's not really your problem. Your problem are these other 5 things. So you're kind of like learning and getting more clarity around the problems as you go. So is it more of like, you have to know this stuff to be most effective when implementing? Or is it more of like, as long as you have one problem, we'll pick out the other problems as the solution starting to get implemented?
Mm-hmm. Now, I think what you're getting at here, Logan, is the idea of analysis paralysis, right? If you try too much, or if you spend too much time thinking through what the problem is, you're never going to take action to actually like solving it or trying to resolve it. And I shouldn't have even used the word solve. We're not solving problems here. What we're doing is we're reducing them and we're mitigating any resistance that we have, right? So the idea here is to at least get to a point where we have a 70% understanding of the root of the issue. And after 70%, you can do something with that. Your team can recognize that there's an issue. They can all build that commitment around solving it. You don't have to have 100% clarity on the problem, because also some of these software systems can help bring out more clarity for you. So being a little bit open-minded there is actually really beneficial. I'd say if you're trying to figure out where to start as far as identifying the problem that you have or the problems, start with kind of mapping out your processes. It sounds so simple, but there are so many people who have never done this where, you know how you run a job from start to finish. So map that out. It's easy to think in your mind, yeah, we do pre-sales, we do estimating, and then we go into the project management, and then we do closeout. Great. That's awesome on a macro level, but that's not going to bring forth any gaps or illuminate any, feedback loops or things like that. So what you need to do is break it down even further. What steps are the individual small steps that you're doing, and then who's doing those steps throughout an entire project phase. And then you can start to recognize, oh, there's gaps here, or, oh my gosh, when we are making this bid request, there's 5 people in our company touching it. Ugh, that's a lot. And that ends up becoming lower and lower on every one of those 5 people's priority lists. And that's why you're not getting those bid requests out for 10 days, right? So it's really kind of helpful to map that process out. I have seen one of our customers use sticky notes for this. So Amzi Lehman at Lehman Construction, he has done an awesome job of mapping out his processes using sticky notes across the wall. And he had his whole team involved in mapping the processes out. And they were arguing about where those sticky notes went. And they were trying to figure out, exactly what it looks like now. And then with sticky notes, the best part of this is that you can move them. So then you can adjust them and say, okay, we need to streamline this. We need this to move over here and this to move over there. Now, once you have kind of a decent understanding of what your processes look like, now you can find software that supports those processes rather than trying to just get a software to solve everything that you're not even clear about yourself.
So I think that was like what you're describing. Like at CGN, we go through EOS, which is basically how to run a business. But one of the things that we do every week is IDS, and I stands for like identify the issue. And basically, a lot of times what we say is like, oh, we're having an issue of, I don't know, we can't hire this one position, or we're having bad candidates come through. When you actually then kind of dive deeper into what we think the issue is and how to solve it, we're realizing that's actually more of a symptom, not really the actual root problem. So what you're talking about is, when you're sitting down and you're going, hey, our overall problem is we're not getting people into design phase fast enough. Is that the problem? Or is the problem like what you're talking about where, we have 5 different people have to touch the estimate before we can, it takes so long, and that's really more of the root of the problem. So what we're talking about here is almost creating it sounds like a flow chart, if you will, of or an order of operations of stuff. I guess is the sticky note route is with your background, I'm sure that's a very rudimentary way, but if that's what works like that, we do whiteboard over here at CGN. Is that the best way to like approach figuring out your overall process and what, how to isolate the problems that we're having, things like that?
I think so. And honestly, sticky notes are still in my daily life for this reason. I also have used Legos to help teams figure this out, where each person built their office with Legos, and then we used masking tape to kind of route out where paper was moving through the office. It doesn't matter what tools you're using. And in fact, that can be a team building experience if you get more, unique with it. But yes, I think so, because right now, having all of our information in our heads is not helping us to process and identify where those gaps are, the bottlenecks are. But when we get it out of our heads, and especially from multiple perspectives in the company on paper, you're realizing like, whoa, I didn't even realize that this was moving in this route, or that we had a bottleneck here. And so the more that you can get all this information out of people's heads, better off you'll be at solving the problem. Also, then it removes the personal part of it. So let's think about psychology here. When I have a system in my mind that I built, and I feel really confident about that, and I am now tied to it, I'm connected to it, I identify with it. Now, when we are talking about this process having an issue or being a bottleneck, I'm going to feel personally responsible for that, but also I will feel very defensive of it. When we get that out of my head and put it on a wall with sticky notes, now it's on a wall. It's not in my mind anymore, and we can actually work with it. It's just like having an argument with your partner, right? Where we all get kind of tied to our ideas, but if you just write down what the problem is and put it in the center of the table, then you can talk about it, and it's not a problem that somebody's owning anymore. It's a problem that gets to be solved.
So when we're talking about this, because like the defensiveness is, I'd imagine, is huge, where it's very much, hey, especially if it's an owner that's been doing it for a while. Hey, I've been doing this for 20 years. You've been with the company for 2 years. How are you going to come in and shift stuff? Or like, hey, we tried that back in 2004. It didn't work, so we're not going back to that. How involved does getting the team into problem solving like actually help to identify what the problems are, where they lie, how to solve it, versus just the owner going into their office and coming out a day later going, I have it all mapped out, we're good to go?
Two things here. First of all, have you ever seen Undercover Boss?
Yes.
The owner never knows what's going on behind the scenes. And even if you think you do, I challenge that. I encourage you to just sit in your customers, even your employees' shoes, your subs' shoes. Sit in their shoes for a little bit. Let them tell you how they are doing their job, and just shut your mouth, listen, because often we don't do that. We think it is beautiful, from a big picture perspective. We're like, yep, if we are on time with our projects, that's all that matters. No, but you don't see the pain that's happening behind the scenes. And so really, get your head kind of out of the numbers, out of the schedule. And I know that others may argue this with me, but I think that as a leader, as an owner, we need to step into our followers' experience and hear it from their perspective. And then you're going to really be illuminated to a lot of gaps. You're also going to find some opportunities there too, maybe untapped resources that you didn't know about. And so I think it's beneficial in multiple fronts. Also, the second point here is that if you as an owner are creating or solving the problem for your team, you might feel like you're the savior coming in to do that. However, your team is not going to be bought in to that solution. So again, that commitment part is so important. And once you get your team members on board with the solution, they're going to feel a sense of ownership, and they will carry that solution forward. So I know, Logan, we're going to be talking a little bit more about how to get your team to use a system. And this is kind of the bridge to that. If you don't bring them in from the beginning, then over time, they're going to feel more disconnected from it. And I don't know about you, but when I was told to do chores, I didn't want to do them. But then when it was my idea to do the chores because I got an incentive for it, then I did them. And so it's a very similar thing with your users and software, is they have to feel like part of this was their idea, so they have ownership and they want to drive it forward. Otherwise, you're going to have the hard job of driving it forward from now on.
Well, let's transition into that then. So, because like at the end of the day, software is only as good as how much you use it. It's because I mean, we deal with this in our world with marketing, where a lot of people are like, well, what kind of camera should I go out and get if I want to take better photos of my projects and stuff like that? And I'm just
Yeah.
like, look, like you're not even taking iPhone photos right now. So like, you're going to go out and spend a bunch of money, but ultimately you're not actually going to do the thing, because it's not like, oh, if I get a CRM, then I'll start tracking leads. The people that are just tracking leads in spreadsheets, those are the ones that when they do a CRM, they actually adopt it, versus those that are like, once I get this thing, then I'm going to start job costing that. So there's a lot of buy-in that needs to happen from both the owner, but also the team. So when it comes to getting, especially, we're talking blue collar more so than, maybe like with us, where we work in an office and people are more used to using tech. How are the companies out there that are really crushing it with JobTread or softwares in general in the construction space? How are they really getting that full team buy-in from the beginning?
hmm That's a great question. So again, first and foremost, get them involved before even picking the software. Or if you've already picked the software and you feel like it's too late, don't worry. There are ways to do it. But the ideal way is getting them involved on wanting to solve the problem with you. After that point, when you do have the software, okay, great. Now start to think about your talents among your team. You might have a field employee who absolutely loves organizing things. Gosh, use them for helping to set up the system. Even though that's not their job in your company, they will still be bought into the system if you kind of give them this special project. Or if you have, an office manager, let's say, who truly understands how to communicate with your clients or how to move through the budgeting aspects of your jobs, okay, we'll put them in charge of creating the SOPs or standard operating procedures for using this software. The more that you can get your team involved in the setup process, the more they will take that ownership. Again, it's all about ownership. If you have high engagement with your team from the very beginning, they'll want to then see it through. If you don't, then they are just going to feel like it's something that was pushed upon them, and it's just another thing they have to learn, right? And so we all are inundated with software every single day. So I don't know about you, but sometimes it gets overwhelming, and I even resisted ChatGPT when it first came out because I'm like, no, not another thing. And you also I should mention, don't even know the fears that your employees are having in that moment. When ChatGPT came out, I was fearful, and I didn't realize that until I actually sat with it for a minute. Even though I do this for a living, I was fearful of the threat that would bring to me and my job, and how it was going to change the trajectory of my work. Like, there's a lot of emotions that can come with the transition process of bringing on software. There's over 15 different types of fears that people could have around new software coming into their environment. And so listening to your employees and trying to be proactive with those conversations can really help. And so one example that I have here is, maybe there's a customer, maybe there's a employee in your company who had built a really great process, and now their process is going to be put on the shelf because the software is going to do it for you all. Okay, well, that's scary for that person. Suddenly, what they had built and what they put a lot of energy in is now going to be replaced. And what does that mean for them in their role? Do they still have the value in the company that they had at that time when they first built the process? That's a lot of emotions to work through. Also, there's a grieving process involved. Any change brings forth grief. And so if you are not recognizing, oh gosh, this is a loss for some people to bring in this software, you as an owner or a leader could be super excited to bring a new software in. This is going to change everything. It's going to make everything so awesome. But a lot of your team members may feel a sense of loss, like loss of control, a loss of a job, a loss of understanding, a loss of their position in the company. So really start to think about how the new software could impact your employees and have those conversations early with them. Reassure them and help them understand that it's not going to be something that will cause a loss on their end, but actually, how can this be a gain for them? Also, every employee has problems that they face on the daily in your company. And if you don't think that they do, that's where you really need to step into their shoes. But if you sit with them and see what their problems are that they're facing every day, and try to position the software as something that can solve those unique little nuance problems, then they're going to be even more curious, right? So we really have to have the software be seen as something that is an added benefit for each individual, not just for the company.
Yeah, I remember like just on the fear side, and you brought up earlier about like change management, and I didn't realize it's like the owner of the company where like I basically kind of have like final say on things, like just the amount of like power you have. And I remember I was in it was a workshop I went to, and basically the guy was saying, look, as the owner, you could be the nicest owner ever. You're super cool with everybody, but at the end of the day, you're a black bear in the room. Meaning at any point, the black bear, they could be super nice, they could know how to juggle, run a unicycle, they could still kill you. So it's like just the whole premise was basically like understand that when you, and I still deal with this with the team where they're like, Logan, like when you say something, you sometimes say it kind of harshly. Just the fact that it's coming from you, even if you said it softly, we're going to take it in a very potentially harsh manner. So like recognize that you can't say something very, that's kind of a tougher, more intense thing to say in a very intense way. You have to soften it up and go more on how you say it in a nice way, because it'll still land in a very like aggressive manner. So I'd imagine with like a lot of this stuff, like the fear around, hey, we're doing a new software, it immediately goes to, will I have a job? And I remember I read a book back in the day of all about marketing attribution. And the very first chapter, which was basically all about how to get, attribution, meaning how to know in your business what's working from like a revenue generation perspective. The whole first chapter of this book was the guy saying, just so you know, this is super helpful. But it also, he's like, I have gone into companies and put these systems in place, and they got rid of entire departments because they realized, wow, hey, we thought email marketing, for example, was super effective. And once we actually put these systems in place, we realized that they weren't really doing much to drive the company forward. We need to reallocate those funds, and removed all those people. So it was such like a nerdy topic that this guy was like going, with great power comes great responsibility into, which at first was like, oh, this is kind of odd. But as he started giving examples of like teams getting laid off for this, it was like, oh, wow, this is actually a real thing.
Right.
So when it comes to implementing the softwares in this place and people are nervous about it, one of the things that you brought up was basically, hey, you need to go in and say, look, Anna, I'm not saying that, as you're the person who does all the estimates, and we're now about to get this software that's going to really help expedite estimates. It's not necessarily that we're trying to replace you. It's just we're trying to, help you even more. How much does the owner need to know the software in and out to then be able to have that conversation to say, no, 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 I know exactly how JobTread does estimates. This is how it's going to benefit you, versus the owner going, look, I'm not really the software person, but I know that we all need to do this. Let's figure out together how this software can help with your estimating.
Yes, I think what you were leaning into at the end there, Logan, is the key, right? You don't have to have all the answers for them to have these conversations. And you also don't have to identify the fear for your employee. You can sit down and ask your employee, hey, I know that this will be a change. How would this impact you? And having that question presented to an employee just opens the door for the conversation. And then they can tell you fears that they have. Maybe it's even a fear of, this is going to add a ton more work to my plate. And that's scary, right? And so if they already feel overwhelmed, my gosh, now you're pushing them deeper underwater in their eyes. So asking the question and allowing them to tell you the answer is going to be really important. Also, because that'll reduce assumptions that you might have about them as well. But then if they tell you fears that they have, this is a moment of creating that curiosity. Like, gosh, that's a very valid fear. And I'm really curious if there's any part of your job that could be benefited by this software. If there's a sticky point or a pain point that you experience every day or every week in your work, what is that pain point? And help them identify that and then say, I wonder if the software can help. Here's resources. Could you take a look into the YouTube? JobTread has over 400 videos on our YouTube channel for that reason. Let's be transparent. Let's help teams to see what they need, right? And so here's the YouTube for this software. Go and take a look at it and tell me if you find a way that this software could help you. And so while it might be more work to ramp up, it might take off some work off your plate as well. So get them curious, get them exploring and answering their own questions, and help them to alleviate their own fears. You don't have to be the one that can do all of that for them, but if you're facilitating the conversation, that's really what your role should be.
What do you do if you have somebody that's just like so resistant to the new software? Like my cousin works construction management, but he's like in commercial, and he talks about, he's like, you have these kids, they come out of college, they have a degree in construction management, and they're walking around with iPads, trying to show everything on the job site. And then you have these 55-year-old, 60-year-old project managers that have never used an iPad in their life. And it's just like, he was explaining, like, the iPad is correct, but there's a whole level of like, the people using the iPad don't have that much experience, but the people that don't use the iPad are doing things inefficiently, but they know all the ins and outs of stuff. So like, if you have somebody that, is that they've been in the trades for a long time, you're coming in going, I know we can make this thing better, and they're just resistant. Is this a scenario where ultimately it just doesn't work and we got to go our separate ways? Or is there like, well, maybe we just let this one person not use this software, but everybody else is going to do it? I guess, how do you approach scenarios like that?
Yeah. Change resistance is one of my favorite things to work through because
perfect.
There's always a why. There's always a reason for it, and this is where those conversations should be happening. So continuing to tell them to use it is not going to help here. You have to solve the what's in it for me, right? So if I just tell someone, hey, you need to be using JobTread because that's how I'm going to know what's going on in the job or on the workplace. Sorry, the job place, the job site, in the office. That's how I'm going to know what's going on with the business. That's not giving them any benefit to use it. And so really start to kind of think about, how can you position the software so that it adds benefit to them? And this is kind of extending off of one of my recent points, but even more so, like kind of packing the software full of value is going to be one of your biggest bang for your bucks. Because if you create a software environment that is a one-stop shop for your employees, it's going to be the place that they go to and that they start relying on. So, for example, creating, fields with data in the software for everything when it comes to a clickable link to go and see the job site location on Google Maps so they can easily route to it, or having information about the client, that they have these pets and this is what to expect, and here's the access code for the house, and all of the nuanced information that they would ask you or ask somebody else or text somebody for. Put all that in the system. The more value you can pack into the system, the more they will see what's in it for them, and they'll start relying on it, and then we can get it to be a part of their routine. Also, you can incentivize software. I mean, it's something that I've seen so many users do, and it works. So they have done things like, hey, if you submit this many photos every single day on the job site, or if you create a daily log for 30 days straight every single day, then you're going to get an added bonus on your paycheck. Honestly, that money should be a drop in the bucket for you, knowing the value that can come from it. Additionally, I've seen people use software for team engagement. And so they'll post people's birthdays on there. They will post jokes on the activity feeds and things that really kind of gets their team to use the software in a different way, but drives their engagement. So that would be one thing. Pack it full of value. Another thing is, don't save data in multiple places. If you are giving them the choice to go to an Excel spreadsheet versus this new software, they're going to keep going to the Excel spreadsheet. So you can, if you are really uncomfortable and you're in the transition process, okay, keep the Excel spreadsheet, but don't let anyone access it but you. You can change those permissions and then make them use the software as the only source of truth. Once you get through that transition point, though, once you're implemented, get rid of the spreadsheet yourself. If they don't see you using the software to get your truth, then they are not going to be encouraged to use the software themselves. And they will start thinking, gosh, then this is not going to be the source of truth that our company should be using. So you have to be bought in. You have to have it as the only source of truth, and you have to pack it full of value.
So that was going to be like my question was, when we when somebody or when we're trying to adopt this into our company, do we just dip our toe in and then get our ankle, then our knees, then, slowly we go in? Or is this like yesterday we did spreadsheet and now we're doing, this software? It sounds like it's, hey, we're going to prep for this. We're going to have meetings so everybody's on the same page. But once we make the switch, we're all in. Now, if that's the approach, let's say you're the owner and you're now trying to work with the estimator and then the project manager and then like the subs, like should it be something where everybody jumps in all at once? So it's almost like the estimator and the PM, if they're dealing with frustrations or if they're dealing with successes with the software, they can kind of connect, because I know it's one thing if the owner says, look, you got to use this software, but it's another thing if their direct peer is going, hey, this is a great software. Now they're a little bit more receptive to it. So is the idea that we say, all right, yesterday we did not use a software and now the whole team is using it? Or is it like, hey, I'm just going to work with the estimator first as the owner, get them ready to roll, because I can really only spend X amount of time trying to get somebody into the software. I can't do the whole company at once. So we're kind of sticking and moving person by person. Or is it we're all going to it all at the same time?
It's a really good question. And I wish I could be straightforward in the answer. It's really honestly circumstantial. If you're in the middle of a super high-end big project, you may have some overlap between your software programs if you're switching from one to the other, or you may have overlap from your Excel spreadsheet to the software program. And that's okay as long as your team has clarity on when to use which, okay? Now, I have also seen some that start with department by department, and that could work if you are focusing on specific priorities. So if you're thinking, all right, when we bring on the software, our top priority is estimating, and then our next priority is scheduling. Okay, great. So then you can package those and learn and build the software to meet your needs in those areas one by one. However, I challenge you and I encourage you to kind of think about, could you tackle more and could you get higher engagement if you let go as the owner a little bit and enabled and empowered your team members to take on the implementation process? And so you could pick your champion from each of your departments if you have a larger company and say, all right, from the estimating team, this person's going to be like our JobTread implementer. And then from the project manager team, this person's going to drive it forward, and then you can get them to be learning all at the same time. And then you can have, meetings with them as they go through the implementation process. Make sure that they know when you want to be involved in decisions and when you're empowering them to make the decisions on their own, because they know their jobs better than you. Just can put that out there. And so that way, then you can kind of have a team approach to it. So it really kind of depends on your size of your company, your comfort level, and what kind of projects you're in the middle of right now.
So with that last part of it, what projects we're in the middle of right now, I'd imagine there's a lot of people that, well, that's how we were with ClickUp. We got it. And then because everything was so busy and we're trying to work on it, and basically we felt like we did not have the time to then implement a software that was going to help us save time. So ultimately, we just kept on this rat race until we finally had enough pain that we said, we have to do this thing. So
yes.
Is there a right and a wrong time to implement a software that's going to be a pretty large change within the business?
That's a really good question. And I would say if you keep putting it off, then now is the right time. That just means that you're never going to get to a point where you feel like ready or that you don't have or that you do have the time. And hopefully that's the case. Hopefully your business is booming and you're continuing to be busy. Then that would be great, but that then just means you got to not put it off anymore. In some other cases, though, for like our outdoor living contractors, you might be the most busy in the spring and summer months. So then you can plan for maybe a fall or winter, onboarding. And that would be great as well. But I would say that the biggest thing to really kind of think about is how you're going to dedicate time each day to get this up and rolling. Every single software program, every single one of them will have a ramp up. And that just means that you have to put in more effort at the beginning to then get the return in the end and save time in the end. And so even just spending, a half hour or an hour every morning, wake up a little earlier every morning and spend some time on it, that has been proven actually to be very successful for a lot of our users. And so it's really a commitment is what it boils down to, is making the commitment and just keeping it as a priority. But I've seen so many people do like arbitrary timelines for, okay, we're gonna just pick a date, and by this date we're going to get it up and running, or by this date we're going to get our team using it. You don't have to do that. As long as you have a strategy on priorities that you want to, pick up with the new software, then you can get your team learning while you're building it out. And that's the best approach overall, because then everyone's approaching it at the same time, and then you're ready to go.
So one of the things that you brought up earlier that I want to kind of go back to is the idea of champions. And if you're listening to this, I want you to think through, when you have a software, are you typically the champion, or is there somebody else on your team that is the champion? So when you're working with, organizations, Anna, about the idea of champions, is this like the owner needs to go in and go, look, Anna, software. I see you use TikTok every so often. You're going to be the JobTread champion. Or is it like, hey, we need to have a champion for this. Who wants to do it? I guess what's the best way to actually identify who should be the champion, and then make sure that they're seeing this thing through versus just raising their hand because they think that the boss wants them to raise their hand for this thing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Think beyond your teacher's pet.
Yeah.
Honestly, I was a teacher's pet. I can say that, but it's often the person that would be jumping at it is going to be somebody who's like a starter, but they might not be the best person to follow through and finish it, right? Or they may not be the best person to get the rest of your team using it. And so think beyond that. I think back to this big undertaking that I did at a university I worked at. And my supervisor was fantastic. He said, hey, Anna and Paige, you two are going to do this implementation of this entire campus-wide software system. And I was newer, and I didn't really know Paige very well, but what I knew about her is that her and I were complete opposites. And so we were like, okay, I guess we're going to do this. And he said, here are the times where I want you to come to me with a decision. Otherwise, I trust you to make all the rest of the decisions, And so it was very clearly laid out for us. So Paige and I went off and we planned meetings, and we eventually ended up being very successful in bringing on this software system. And it was very widely adopted because we were opposites. If we weren't opposites, and always, and I'm saying this because she's now my best friend, we were literally opposites in every single way. We did the Myers-Briggs, the MBTI assessments and all of that, and every result was opposite. But the cool part about that is that we could approach it from two different angles. I'm a starter. I don't like maintaining things very well. I can finish if we're close to the finish line. I do like that as well, but I am a starter. I'm a go-getter, and also that teacher's pet. But she's the one that loves maintaining things, and she loves following through. And so he positioned us so well to be a team to carry this forward. So it doesn't have to be one person. It could be multiple people. And in fact, that would be advantageous, because you never know what will happen with someone. But the cool part is that it wasn't necessarily like he chose me because I have done software before. I was in his face saying, I want to do this, I want to do this. No, it was that he was very strategic in making sure he had the right work ethic and personalities to carry it through. So really kind of think beyond that first person that comes to your mind, and what other person could kind of round it out to help them carry it forward.
Yeah, I think that's super smart, because I never thought about that. There's this Patrick Lencioni, who's like the big business author. He has this working genius. Have you ever heard of that before, Anna?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like the same idea. It's like widget, where you've got the people that it's an acronym, but basic. You have W's, the wanderers, who are always going, is there a better way? Could we do this a better way? And you're like, well, I'm sure we could. What do you think? And they're like, oh, no, I don't know. I'm just asking if we do. And it works its way to they wonder. Then you have the I is the invention. Then you have the D is the search. So it's the different personality types. And basically he talks about, you need to have the people, within a team, the people that all the way at the beginning are going from they're just trying to think through, could we do things a better way, to the people that also that are going to galvanize the team and get everybody involved, to the people that have that tenacity to finish the project. So basically you have every end of a project, because I'm very much like you, Anna, where I'm so good at like starting it and we should do this and we should do that. And then in 90 days, I want to move off to the next thing. And I just left the whole team in the dust going, well, hey, I'm the one that went out and found ClickUp. You guys need to implement. And then in 90 days, I'm like, actually, I found a better one than ClickUp. What about and they're just like, dude, stop. So I love that approach of like almost having those people that are like really good at, thinking through how do we apply the problems on the job site, that a software could help us out with, all the way down to now who's going to make sure that we're consistently, doing the daily logs. Like it's great to say we need to do daily logs to help out our PMs to make sure that they're, communicating with clients. But if the PM is now like, nah, I'm not doing that, what's the point? So that's super smart.
Yeah. And I want to take this one step further, Logan. I'm sorry, I might derail for just a moment.
No, go ahead.
For those of you who don't have employees as much, but end up working with a lot of subcontractors, that is another thing to really think through is how can you engage a few of your key subcontractors in the software implementation process? Some of you are like, what? Why would I do that? But honestly, it would help so much because then you can understand what their pain points are with submitting bids and sending you their bills and getting paid out and all of that. And so then you can kind of have them along the journey with you. And then your subs are going to have higher engagement with the new tool. Hopefully, your tool is going to allow you to more effectively communicate with your subcontractors and everyone involved in the project. And so getting them involved as well is going to be really key. I have seen, actually, it started with one of our users and then it grew to more users where they actually have these subcontractor breakfasts every 2 weeks with their sub. And during those subcontractor breakfasts, they make sure that they train them on something like JobTread. And they give them breakfast. They then talk about the projects. They talk about their standards. They talk about safety, all of the important topics, but they make sure that JobTread is included in there. And they give incentives for their subs to use JobTread. And they say, hey, if you submit daily logs or if you submit photos to us, for a full month or throughout this project, we're going to give you an added bonus as well. And so really kind of think beyond just employees and how you can engage your subcontractors and even your customers in the process too.
So let's jump into the idea of the incentives, because you brought up a couple of times, and I know reading, more about like sales management and stuff, like basically how you set up commission structure and incentive structures. That's basically what like a sales team is then going to go after. So if you're really trying to push for, I don't know, subscription sales, you then need to make sure that the sales team is aligned with, okay, we're going to really, want to sell subscription sales because this is how it benefits us. Can you talk more about like examples of incentives, whether it's, like I love the idea of like the daily logs, you're going to get this. Are we talking about, hey, if you do daily logs for a month, we're going to pay you 10 grand. Is it $500? Like, is it more about the actual incentive or like the dollar amount or whatever it is? Or is it more about just like, hey, you did the thing, you're getting some like a really nice sticker, if you will, and it's a sense of pride. I guess, how do you drive that change with incentives?
Yeah, great question. I'd also like to kind of bring forth this balance of accountability and incentives, right? Where you are a leader. Accountability is part of it. You can ask for software to add a ton of requirements in there for your team to complete X, Y, Z, and that's great. But ultimately, as a leader, you also have to hold your team accountable. So there are some measures where it's like, nope, you're not going to get paid unless you do X, Y, Z. And that's accountability. And I think that that's really strong and healthy, and that provides structure for your employees. But then there's that added benefit of incentives that you can use to sweeten the deal. And so think about what you want to hold your team accountable to, so that is bare minimum, that is your job. But if you do extra, now we're going to give you some incentives for that. And so you have to kind of identify what goes where, right? That's a start. Now, with the incentives, they can be whatever the heck you want. And so tune into your team. What's important to them? Maybe money's not important to them. Okay, then that makes sense. Don't give them money. Instead, say, hey, I'm going to bring you out to lunch whoever submits the most photos this month, you get to go to lunch with me. Maybe they just want time with you. That would be really cool. I love having time with our CEO because then I get to hear his thoughts and he gets to hear me, right? But then other drivers could be, just recognition for people. And so saying, hey, they were the top salesperson, or they had the highest level of communication with their clients throughout a project. That is really helpful recognition to have during meetings. But also, I would say that you should be paying based on merit, and you also should be providing more responsibilities and added positions, like position elevations for people based on merit. And so take all of these into account. When they do great things, write it down, make sure that they know that you saw that, and then recognize them for it by giving them a pay bump, or also by promoting them or giving them added responsibility with a pay bump in the organization. I also really like to reward people by showing them that I trust them more. And so, hey, if you complete XYZ, or if you're the highest salesperson or something, then we can, you get more access to me. I want you to be a driver in your department. So I want to hear from you more, and I want to hear your thoughts, and I want you to be a part of these decisions. And so I really like the idea of engaging people more in company decisions when they are showing up more.
When it comes to this idea of really driving home the fact, I love the accountability versus the incentives of look, I remember when I first started CGN, the team kept showing up late, and I was like, guys, how do we get here on time? And it was like, well, what if everybody's on time for a whole week? Everybody gets $50 extra. And I was like, this is your job. I'm not doing that. That is the bare minimum is to show up on time. I was trying to be nice to ask what we need to do, but ultimately, if we can't show up, there's no need to be here. So is this is the incentives versus the accountability? Is there, from what you've seen, a lot of people that just maybe they don't have those standards set with their subs, so now they're almost trying to backtrack the fact that they have a lack of accountability with incentives, and ultimately, if the sub doesn't do what they want them to do, it's well, I just don't give me the extra money, that's fine. But they're actually falling short on the accountability pieces. I guess how do you approach that if you're the owner really trying to get your subs bought into a software as well, because you can't control them. I mean, I guess you could stop working with them, but they're a 1099.
Great question. So a couple thoughts on that. I would say that it should be a bare minimum. You're showing up on time. And if you're not, we're not working with you. And I highly encourage you to be rating your vendors. So in JobTread, you can set up custom fields where you can set up a rating system for all of your subcontractors and show them the rating system. Show your subs. Don't show them what rating they have right now. I mean, you can say everybody starts at a 5. That's great. But show them that you have a rating system and say, hey, if we reduce this number, we're not reaching out to you first. We're only going to reach out to our 5-star vendors first for any future projects. And if they're not available, then we'll reach out to the 4 stars and the 3 stars, so that you're very transparent with how you are going to prioritize your outreach to the sub and their opportunities to work with you. And that way they will know, oh my gosh, yeah, they're tracking it. Often subs anyone, even employees, anyone will kind of slide by if they don't think someone's going to notice. But if you're showing them, hey, we have a system to not only notice this, but to track it, then it's going to help them hold themselves more accountable. It's really difficult to hold yourself accountable if you're leading a company and you have 20,000 other priorities happening. But if they know that that's going to reduce their chances of getting more jobs in the future with a reputable company, then it will only benefit you to show them that transparency.
It's so funny because as you're explaining this, I'm thinking I remember in 5th grade, what our teacher did was everybody had basically on a bulletin board, every single day that you did everything you were supposed to do as a 5th grader, you got a green card. And then if you did something that you weren't supposed to do that wasn't that egregious for the day, you got a yellow card. And then if it was something really bad, you got a red card. And basically at the end of every single month, what would happen is they would then tally up, what you had, and all the kids that had, no red cards and less than 3 yellow cards would then get the end of the month incentive, which could be, I don't know, you get to have like an extra recess or something like that. And because it was live on the bulletin board and you could see at any point how many green cards, how many yellow cards, or how many red cards, each person, including yourself and in the class had, it was very much like, should I do this thing? I know, like, I've got ADHD and I can't sit down, but I don't want to have a yellow card for the day if I stand up when I'm not supposed to. So like,
Right.
the more that you're like explaining these behaviors, the more it's really like the stuff that we were taught when we were like 11, it's shifted a little bit where it's the rating system, but it's live where potentially, the subs could see, hey, if Logan wants to go out and find, like the tile sub, like right
Mhm.
now, I got a 4.8, which I think is good, but he's got 2 other people that are, a 5 with more job. Like that's a great way to do it. So it's like competition to a certain extent. So,
Yeah,
um,
truly. And friendly competition drives people, right?
yeah.
And we have dashboards all over the JobTread office showing our productivity, showing our metrics, and we have our faces attached to them. And there's a reason for that. We have the new dashboards feature on JobTread with thresholds that you can set up so that your sales team members can see their sales compared to others, or your project managers can see the baseline variance on their schedules compared to others. It's helpful. They can be driving factors. Another incentive that just popped to my mind is giving someone a half day. Hey, or a full day off. If you are the person that wins this month for keeping your schedule on track, throughout the project the most, then you get a half day or you get a day off this next month, and just kind of plan it into your resource management. That's something that won't cost you a ton in the long run, but ultimately could really kind of drive the incentive there. So friendly competition, I think, is fantastic as long as you do it right and that you're not pinning people against each other, but more so that you're recognizing positive efforts.
Sure. And last question, and what is something that we haven't talked about yet that you love, that you could nerd out over relating to software and human behavior?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I have over 100 pages on it, but it was so funny when I first wrote the book, it was over 300 pages. And I'm like, no one who I want to talk to with this book is going to have time
Yeah.
to read 300 pages. So I got it down to just over 100 just to give you like the real deal here. But the biggest thing that I think that I really want to harp on and drive home is a software isn't going to solve your problems. A software is just going to be supporting what you have built. And so really know what you have built, and then come after a software with some understanding of what you built, but also approach it with a little bit of an open mind. There's a lot of great minds that build software systems, and the good software systems should be flexible enough to meet your needs, but also should be driving best practices forward. And so approaching a new software system as, gosh, we have our, mapped out process here that works for us, but also with that open mind of we can still improve our processes. So don't be too rigid and learn from the software itself. It can really create this beautiful balance where you are ready to support what you've got, but you're also ready to grow. And sustainability is key in an organization. You want to have your organization be sustainable beyond you. And so putting those processes in place and getting a software system that truly supports what you need is really, really great, but also it should be driving you forward so that it can grow past you.
Love it. And if people want to read your book, can they get it on Amazon? I guess, how do they get it?
Yeah, you can definitely get it on Amazon. It's called Adapt to Adopt, a human approach to software implementation. And so if you just look that up on Amazon, you'll find it and you'll get a copy mailed to you once you get it ordered.
Well, Anna, I appreciate you coming on here and talking all about the human behavior side with software.
Thank you.
If they want to learn more about JobTread, is it jobtread.com easy enough?
Yep, jobtread.com. And we have tons of resources on there. You can also, like I mentioned earlier, check out our YouTube channel. We have over 400 videos on our YouTube channel, and you can see JobTread in action, but also hear from a lot of our users firsthand.
Perfect. Anna, thank you very much. This was awesome.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
All right, there's the episode. That was super cool. What I really like is the level of how she provides some conceptual pieces of like, hey, we need to have a champion here, but also some tactical pieces like the incentives. And if we're going to have a champion, maybe it's not one person as a champion, but maybe it's a small team of champions that kind of span the different levels of how they approach a project, whether they're a starter or a closer, whatever that is. So awesome episode. I really appreciate Anna coming on. Next week, we actually have an interview with one of our own internal SEO specialists, Patrick, and he's going to be talking all through the fundamentals of SEO. Everything is shifting. It's a crazy time in the world of Google, as you probably know. But we're talking through some of the basics of SEO, but also if you are hiring an agency or a company to do SEO, what should you be looking for? What should they be showing you? Should it be leads day one, or should it be more of like, hey, here are some leading indicators that build into it? So Patrick, who's been doing SEO since 2013, so 12 years now, is going to walk through all things SEO so you know what actually works and what doesn't work in the world of SEO.